It had been 4 years. Grégoire had been quiet. The estate settled. The heirs secured. The debt paid. But his health was failing. Death was drawing near. He made a move. He did not send a petition. He did not wait for the court. He did not ask permission. No. In the dark of night, he went for her. Power does not disappear quietly. When it is steady, it looks like authority. When it is threatened, it looks like desperation. For years, Grégoire had relied on paper, on courts, on inheritance law. But when the law stops serving them, some men take matters into their own hands. When men who have long commanded obedience feel their grip loosening, they do not always surrender. Sometimes they reach. And what they reach for tells you everything. Grégoire was feeling that. He was determined to preserve his way of life, preserve his dignity. He had no intention of surrendering either. To him, one move remained. All right, this is how it all went down. After the estate settlement of 1773, Marguerite did not return to Grégoire's home. She was placed in the household of Jean Baptiste, the son who had once signed the emancipation, now her legal master. She had lived in Grégoire's house, borne his children, shared his table. Now she labored under the authority of his heir. Her own children, divided among the same heirs, remained enslaved. 4 years. No petition filed. No challenge raised. No public protest. Grégoire let the arrangement stand. But what is settled on paper is not always settled at home. By 1777, Grégoire was not the man he had been. The rides across his land were shorter. The disputes were handled by others. His voice, once final, required repetition. He was accustomed to obedience. Now he was watching it shift. Marguerite, the children, his household. He had freed her once. He had conveyed her away. Now she lived under his son's authority. And he watched as his own children held power over what he once controlled. Jean Baptiste was no longer signing beneath his father's mark. He was signing above hers. And that arrangement did not sit easily with Grégoire. He had grown restless, troubled by death drawing closer. All of it led to one night. After dark, he went. Not with witnesses, not with paper, not to a stranger's door, to his son's house. Jean Baptiste. He held a knife to his son. He demanded Marguerite. There was shouting, movement in the house. But Jean Baptiste did not pursue his father. None of the children did. The next day, they did not go to court. They did not try to take her back. That night, Grégoire made a promise. He said she would be returned when he died. Until then, she would remain with him. His children calculated. Their father was dying. Time would settle the matter, so they waited. And before morning, she was gone from that household, taken back to him. They resumed living together, not as husband and wife, but as they had before, in Opelousas, until Grégoire's death. Before he died, Grégoire freed Marguerite again. Not quietly, not vaguely. This time, he made it clear. Death was close. Joseph Grégoire Guillory died sometime between 1777 and the spring of 1778. He had taken her back. He had freed her. Then he was gone. While he lived, his children did not challenge him. They did not send men to retrieve her. They did not return to court. They waited. He had promised to return her after his death. Now he was dead, and the promise no longer restrained them. On April 27, 1778, months after his father's death, Jean Baptiste went before the commandant at Opelousas. He did not call it reconciliation. He called it abduction. He described the night his father came to his door, the threat, the blade, Marguerite taken from his household, and he demanded her return, not as a father's companion, not as a woman reclaimed, as a runaway slave. The dispute did not remain in Opelousas. It moved beyond New Orleans, beyond the parish. Authority did not sit in Opelousas, not even in New Orleans. It sat across the water. The case was sent to Havana. While papers crossed the Gulf, Marguerite's children remained in the households of their half-siblings, still enslaved. She and her children said they had been freed in 1770. The emancipation had been witnessed, recorded, approved. The sons themselves had signed beneath their father's mark. The sons told a different story. They claimed the Act of 1770 was not valid. They were too young, they said. Their father had taken advantage of them. And in 1773, when he conveyed Marguerite and the children in the estate settlement, ownership passed to the heirs. Freedom, they said, had never legally existed. On January 20th, 1781, another of Grégoire's sons, Claude Guillory, filed a criminal complaint in New Orleans. He claimed a slave had run away. The slave he named was Marguerite. She was no longer in Opelousas. She was in New Orleans, living, working in the household of Miguel Barre. The complaint was filed. Marguerite was arrested. So was Barre. They were placed in prison. The heirs were no longer waiting on Havana. They moved to assert ownership. Marguerite had survived the knife. She had survived his death. She had survived the first petition. Now she sat in a cell. Freedom, once written in ink, could not open a locked door. The sons believed the law was on their side. Marguerite believed something else. And the courts were about to decide.